In our gospel that we just heard, Jesus says, "Take care to guard against all greed, for though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." And our first reading from Ecclesiastes used the common refrain, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Sometimes we can become very attached to our possessions, and sometimes we are reminded that they are not everything. If you're a parent, you have the blessing of your children sometimes help you to become not too attached to your possessions. I helped my dad with this a few weeks ago. Over the winter, he purchased a used car, and he had brought it home, and I was helping him in the garage to fix a transmission leak. And after we fixed it, I was pulling it out of the garage where I backed it into the side of the garage door and damaged the quarter panel. He was hoping to bring it to the Nationals. So children help their parents not become too attached. The Lord can help us at times. But I imagine he was thinking in his mind, vanity of vanities, as that happened, right? And sometimes we're the same way. We can become very attached to material things, and they begin to consume us. We're overwhelmed by preoccupation with these things. And against that, our second reading from Paul says, "Brothers and sisters, if you are raised with Christ, seek what is above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Think of what is above, not of what is on earth." Think of what is above. A few weeks ago, our youth group went to Steubenville, Ohio for a conference, and the theme this year was the word consumed. We talked about the Lord's consuming love for us, but we also talked about how so often our minds and our lives can be consumed with worldly concerns, with things that are urgent but not important, with attachments to material things or a preoccupation with the future. And in our gospel, this man is consumed with preoccupation about many things, but he loses sight of the Lord and what matters as a result. And perhaps you've had a similar experience of this sort of over-attachment or preoccupation of your mind being consumed not with what is above, but what is on earth, with material possessions or some future thing. Earlier this week, I joined the women's group down at Sacred Heart. They were looking at the readings for this coming Sunday, which is always a nice practice to do, kind of get a sneak preview. And one of the women said that these readings reminded her of her own constant struggle to be present in the moment. We're so inclined to quickly jump from one thing to the next. We often spend our time constantly looking ahead to the next thing, and so it's hard to be present. Our psalm today, one of the verses said, "They are like the changing grass, which at dawn springs up anew, but by evening wilts and fades." And it describes often our own movement of interest and enthusiasm, which so quickly springs up, but then withers and fades. I might think of, as children, or how we're excited about the next big toy, and then as soon as we get it, we move on. We're already not interested again. Growing up, I always liked to read Calvin and Hobbes, and there was one series of panels where he's looking ahead to this propeller beanie that he's excited to get. He thinks about it all day. It consumes his mind, his thought. As soon as he gets it, he's disappointed. He moves on to the next thing. And so often we can be the same way. Our interest springs up at dawn, but by evening wilts and fades, and we constantly jump from one thing to the next, always looking ahead to the next thing. And so in a way, there's really two lessons in our gospel today. The one is maybe more obvious, this instruction about our things, our possessions, and a warning against greed. And we're probably familiar with this lesson, but it's always a good reminder, because without realizing it, we can start to fall back into that over-attachment. But also there's a second lesson, a sort of admonition about how we approach even our time. The rich man in our gospel starts to look ahead to the future. And this lesson is maybe a little more subtle. You and I might not have a lot of possessions or a lot of money, or we might find that we're not too attached or becoming greedy. But we can also have a kind of greed show up in our attitude about time and about our failure to be present. And I think this one's much harder for us in our current culture. And so we shouldn't get discouraged about this, but rather realize here's an opportunity to really grow in our faith that maybe we weren't aware of before. St. Anthony the Great has a quote. He says, "There are 3 traps of the devil that steal peace and joy: regret for the past, fear of the future, and ingratitude for the present." And sometimes all 3 of those are hitting us at the same time. Sometimes our preoccupations are with the future and not with anything material, but with whatever that next big step is. Some people have shared, as a couple, this can happen looking ahead to each phase in life. Dating, and then you're looking ahead to engagement, but then looking ahead to marriage, then to children, then to some further stable situation, a change of job or home, always looking ahead. What's next? What's next? Even in seminary, this was a temptation for me and my fellow seminarians to always be looking ahead to, once I'm a priest, here's what I'll do, or what's the next step? Always struggling to be present in the moment. And so Jesus is not just talking about detachment from material things, he's also talking about our entire way of life, our relationship with God, and inviting us to really be present. For the past couple of years, I've helped a little bit with the vocations office, helping especially young men who are discerning a vocation to priesthood and kind of guiding them along that process and encouraging them. And there's a common struggle, especially for young discerners, to be preoccupied with the future, wondering, where is God calling me? What's the next step? Which way should I go? And they can start to become very worried and overwhelmed and anxious about the future. And I learned this discernment secret. I got it from someone else, but I love to share it because it really kind of cut through all of that. And it was a very simple lesson, but I think it's relevant for each of us as well, not just for those thinking about a religious vocation. And the advice was, be faithful to your current state in life. Be faithful to your current state in life. In other words, God is calling you to follow him today. The future is important and we should plan ahead for it, but the fact of the matter is, at this moment, we're here today, and this is where God wants to meet us. This is where God wants to encounter you, and this is where God is inviting you to follow him. And so be present to your current state in life. Be faithful to your current state in life. And the magic, in a sense, of this is that if we do that, it's very easy for the Lord to bring us where he wants us to be. It's not hard for the Lord to guide us, to providentially place us where he wants us to be. The much harder thing is for us to be present and to trust, rather than always looking ahead or thinking what else we might need. And so if we're able to be faithful to our current state in life, whatever that might be, then the rest of the journey is actually quite easy by contrast. The Lord can easily place us somewhere, and knowing that we'll trust him and be present there as well. And so, as we think about these readings, as we kind of maybe take some takeaways from them, we're invited to reflect a little bit, to ask ourselves, where am I dedicating my life and my heart? Am I pouring out my life for things on earth that aren't as important, or for what is above, as Paul reminds us? And this doesn't mean that we all need to become priests and nuns and monks, but it does mean we should look at, where are we dedicating our time and our energy? Where are we pouring out our heart? Where are we making sacrifices in our life? And are they for worthwhile things or for more foolish things, as our gospel says, things that have no lasting importance or spiritual value? It's easy to be sucked into these, but we're invited to take a step back today and to reorient ourselves towards the Lord. As Paul says, seek what is above. As Jesus says, seek to be rich in what matters to God. One practical takeaway that I have is sometimes it's hard to be present in the moment. And so sometimes even in Mass, if I'm starting to think ahead to the next thing, even in my regular day, I might say this little mantra to myself. I'll say, there's nowhere else I need to be. There's nothing else I need to do. This is the center of my day. This is the most important thing. And this is valuable whether we're talking about just this moment or our life in general, to say there's nowhere else I need to be. There's nothing else I need to do. Right now, as we gather around the altar to be present to the Lord, this is where we need to be. This is where he wants us to be, and this is where he wants to encounter us. So we're invited to really enter into the Mass, to be present, to share our preoccupations, our worries, our concerns with him, but then trust that Jesus wants to meet us here, and if we're present to him here, it'll be very easy for him to guide us wherever he's calling us next. Maybe to kind of wrap this up, we can conclude all of this with actually a beautiful line that is from our opening hymn we sang. The third verse kind of captures all of this and wraps it up, and is perhaps a good manifesto for us as we go forward from Mass today. It says, "Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart, high King of heaven, my treasure, thou art.